on. Mental Health 101 is created to empower our mental health awareness. And today I have my special guest. She's the author of the book Pillars for Life, a guide to spiritual ethics and practice, none other than Miss Catherine Crestani.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me back again.
Welcome to Mental Health 101, Miss Catherine. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So, I am a leadership coach, intuitive healer, also a podcaster and author, as you can see my books there on the screen. And I'm also a speaker, and I mainly focus on empowering mums and healers to create a business that aligns with their soul so they can have the health, the family, and the life that they want to live.
Definitely, Miss Catherine Cristani. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom on mental health 101. So tell us, what is a mental health for your definition?
Hmm. Well, I feel mental health is, we always have the demons that that pop up in our head. We have what I would say is the ego. We have that voice inside our head that's just trying to keep us safe, but it doesn't like when we step outside our comfort zone. And it especially rears its head when we're tired or exhausted. So, we always go through these highs and lows. Life isn't always meant to be blissful and joyful all the time because we need to experience both extremes. We're human. But in the end, mental health is about being able to bring yourself back to balance and to keep going. And sometimes we need to find support to get through those voices in our head and allow us to rebalance, but also understanding at a deeper level why we get to those states so that when we do get to them again, because they can come back up again depending on what your life circumstances are or things like that, it's about having the tools or the people around you to support you to bring you back to balance. And when you're in balance, it's like the voices are kind of still there, but they don't run the show. And I guess that's for me the definition of mental health is learning how to balance the voices in your head versus that intuition and the voice in your heart.
Miss Catherine, the pillars for life, or yes, the pillars for life, a guide to spiritual ethics and practice. How do you define mental health over this book?
Well, I feel the biggest thing, the practices that are shared in this book help you come back to yourself. So, there's a lot of, there's one aspect about ego versus intuition and learning how to define the two, but also about knowing yourself. There's a whole chapter about knowing yourself and others because the more you know yourself, the more you understand when things start to creep up. So often, especially when you talk about healing, people talk about that, oh, you go to a healer and then you'll be healed and everything will be fine. No, that's just one layer that you've stripped off because the underlying wound and those triggers, they're always going to be there, but you learn how to befriend them and be aware of them. And that's the theme through this book. And why part of why I called it Pillars for Life and was guided to was because these aspects, as much as they need to apply in your practice, you can't just show up in one way in your life and not in another because your mental health won't cope with that. It's not what happens on the outside of you is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So if you're constantly pretending to be this one person when you show up to your job or to this beautiful business you've created, and then you're another person when you're at home or another person when you're with friends and you keep changing between the two, that's not going to be good for your mental health, but it's also not good for you because you're living different lives. And this book talks about, stripping away the masks and stripping away and being truly honest and getting okay with being human because so often, we don't talk about mental health and we don't talk about how we really are. I always think of the example of when people say, how are you? You automatically default to good. And I had to break that with myself because I was saying I was good, and in this inside, I was dying. I really wasn't
Yes.
good. I really wasn't okay. So, what friend of mine, he says, how's your mental health today? And I was like, wow, that's a different question, because it pulls you out of, that default of saying good. Even when I signed in, you said, how are you? And I'm like, I'm okay, because I'm quite tired today. I've got a lot going on, and, I'm okay. I'm not like jumping off the walls. I'm not like, in saying that, I am excited because I get to talk to you again, Daniel. But at the same time, you know, you have to be honest with the words that you use and share with people. And I feel too, there's this hidden, well, it's not even hidden. There's this culture that we don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about emotions and things that we're going through. Everything's just meant to be good, and I think that's something that's really important, because when you don't honor your words, which is part of being authentic, which is one of the pillars in the book, and you're not being fully honest with what's going on with yourself when you share it with others, then that itself is showing up as a misalignment in your life and can lead to mental health issues as well.
Definitely. Very well said, Miss Catherine. Beautifully, beautifully articulated. How can we shift mental health awareness from reducing stigma to driving a tangible systemic change, like in the workplace policies, healthcare access, and education?
Well, I think you just
What
named
a
every
size.
system that is not actually empowering you to do that. And it's funny because I left behind a lot of those systems a long time ago and stepped outside them because they weren't supporting me the right way. So your question's kind of loaded, because and I'm not putting anything on doctors or psychologists or anything like that, because they're doing the best they can based on the training they've been given. But, things like psychology, you get stuck in a talk therapy loop and you don't actually get to the root cause of problems, because so often we neglect to go back to our childhood, or we're afraid to go back to our childhood and see how things are created. Even in the education system, when a child puts their hand up and you tell them to, and you might snap at them and say, put your hand down, I'm not waiting for you're not allowed to ask questions now. That could be enough for that little person to then feel that they can't speak up. There's all these, and it's not putting it's not putting the weight, but it's just being aware of how influential children are to what we say to them, and how much that their behavior can be shaped from that. So I guess the short answer would be everyone needs to be retrained, but the long answer would be that we really have to look at um, allowing people the space to actually have conversations about that they're okay, but you need to create a container around that as well, because if people don't feel safe and don't feel like they can be vulnerable with you, then they're not going to talk about these issues happening in their life or what's going on. I'm quite lucky. And blessed, because one of my gifts being an intuitive healer is people can come in and talk about it. And I said, I can see straight through what's going on for them straight away. So I can help guide them to that point. Whereas other people might not have that. And often it comes from childhood. And a lot of work on inner child. It can be, things that happen in the household. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily be a big trauma, but it might be, a little kind of trauma that happened that was enough to turn us off. So when we're looking at these systems, I guess my biggest thing would be allowing people to start to explore their emotions, and especially modeling it to children, because it's such an important thing that we forget to do, is allow our children to actually express their emotions. So and also explaining to if you're a parent, explaining to your child what emotions you're going through, because kids feel you. They like little emotional radars. They especially if anyone's a teacher listening or works with children, they'll understand what I'm talking about. If you're having a bad day and you don't learn how to rebalance that, the children pick up on it and they just feel like blood in the water, right? They're like, oh, she's having a bad day. Let's act up, let's make this day even worse. And but by explaining what's going on, especially as a parent to your child, it can be really powerful, because it's teaching your child how to regulate their own emotions and why they might be feeling a certain way. And sometimes it's just nice for them to know that you're feeling how you're feeling, not because of something they did or not because of an action that happened. It's like, actually, no, I'm having a really stressful time at the moment and it's making me feel really frustrated or it's making me feel really sad. And actually putting that into words will help your own child create like this emotional regulation and more emotional intelligence. So I guess that is probably what is missing from all those systems, ability to talk about emotions and develop emotional intelligence.
Miss Catherine, in your book Pillars for Life, which chapter do you want to share to us about mental health?
I just keep hearing knowing yourself and others, because without knowing yourself and knowing how you interact with other people and why you interact with other people, and learning how to not react in situations, it's really hard to actually build meaningful relationships that aren't highly charged. So, so often our ego wants to kick in, and when we're in an argument or having a discussion with someone and we feel like they're wrong and we're right, we want to do everything to prove that, right? So we go into a reactionary state and we're like, no, that's not right, and rah, rah, rah. Whereas if we actually take a moment and we pause, because the pause can be so powerful, if we take a moment and we pause and actually go, huh, why is this triggering me so much, and what's going on with that, and having that compassionate self-inquiry with yourself can be such an important thing to change. And it also helps your mental health because you're not on the attack all the time. You're actually going within. And compassionate inquiry can be so important too. Like if you're feeling really depressed, why am I pressing down my emotions? What don't I want to feel? If you want to, even people who go to addictions, often it can be because they're numbing, because they don't want to feel something or they don't want to be attached to something. Or it can be the other way where they need something because they're not feeling anything, because, they're not like following their soul fulfillment. And then when you get to that overwhelm as well, overwhelm can be you just don't have the answers yet. So it feels too big. So then you get overwhelmed. So there's all these kind of triggers. But when you get to know yourself really well and start to trust that, it helps you come back to who you really are at a soul essence. But you need to learn to be compassionate with yourself too, and have that ability to pause and take a moment rather than reacting. Like, I feel, how different would the world be if we all took a moment to pause rather than react to everything that people say to us or post on our social media or whatever it might be?
Yes, people don't care what people what say about you. Well, Miss Catherine, in social media, helping normalize mental health conversations or exacerbating self-diagnosis, comparison, and distress.
I love this question, Daniel. Well, first of all, I would highly recommend not using GPT to help you work through your mental health crisis. It might give you some ideas or some tips, but does not know you, and this is where you really need to actually find another human to work through it with you.
Yes.
And I guess with social media, you have the ability to control what shows up on your feed, right? So, if you're getting constantly exposed to things that aren't good for your mental health, unfollow them. Doesn't matter if they're family or friends or whatever it might be. If they're triggering you constantly, unfollow them. I will sometimes follow people and then I'll see their feeds and I'm like, oh gosh, no, unfollow, because you can actually control that. And it's like, it also extends to like what music you're listening to. Like the more negative the lyrics are in the music that you're listening to, and there's been heaps of studies on this, the more it hurts your mental health. You're better off listening to things with uplifting beats and uplifting tones. Same with who you put yourself around. So as much as social media can, elevate mental health awareness because people could have these conversations. And I've seen some really amazing posts of people being so vulnerable and honest and just being true to what they're feeling in the moment and the emotions that are coming up. and it's moving. Like, it moved me to tears, some of these things I had. I'm like, thank you for talking about it, but then there's other ones where you can just feel the energy's different, and it can feel like you're getting sucked into this portal of like, oh gosh, this makes me judge myself, or this makes me question who I am. And and they're the ones you want to unfollow, because you can control what comes into your life and what you see, and what you end up exposing yourself to. Same with like what you watch on TV. Like, it can actually have an impact on your mental health. What games you play, if you're a gamer, whatever it might be, it can impact you on like a deeper level. So if you're already feeling a little bit unstable, don't go sit there and scroll through social media and doom scroll, because that is not going to help you out of your situation. You might have someone that you follow that you look for inspiration. Great. But if you can, reach out to them and see if they can give you the support you need. And if they can't, go find a human. This is what I want to emphasize. Go find a human,
Not
and
AI.
not AI. And don't get me wrong, I use AI a lot, to help me create things, or to help me get wording right, or to help me do research. But at the same time, it has its place. And I feel, we can't replace people who, when we are doing this deep level of healing, and we can't replace people when we need human contact. We are humans. We're designed to connect with other people. And, isolating yourself can be a detriment to your mental health too. Like, if you feel like, I can't go out in the world, or whatever it might be, that can also be an issue. But who you surround yourself by, because we are energy beings. So if you put yourself in rooms or places with people who constantly suck your energy, or talk down to you, or talk down to each other, it will lower your energy even more. And go find a group of people who talk about their dreams and actually go do them, or go find a group of people who inspire you. They're the people you want to be around, because that will help lift your mental health state as well.
Definitely. Miss Catherine, as an author, podcast host, and advocating mental health awareness, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my short term goals are, I'm running a retreat at the end of this month in Byron Bay, Australia, if anyone wants to come, where we're actually supporting people to make their dreams and visions come to life with actionable steps. So it is a soul aligned business retreat. And the amazing thing with that is it's so powerful for your mental health, because we're actually looking at nourishing the body and the mind as well, and have practices such as breath work and lifeline healing, as well as some other energetic clearing practices. Because if you don't look after your body and your mind, it's really hard to show up in your business and show up for life, really. So that is one of my short-term projects. But my long-term projects is to my 10-year vision is to actually create a spiritual school for
Oh,
kids.
yes.
Yes, so that can actually come and learn to unpack their gifts and be truly nourished and nurtured from a really early age, and learn how they feel to learn too. So that is my long-term project. So yeah.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Catherine, and
Thank you.
looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be, of course, like you?
Um, I feel find the right support. Whether it doesn't matter where you are in your life, if you think you got it all together at the moment, this is a perfect time to go find your dream team. That's what my coach calls it, your dream team, or people to support you, because life doesn't always stay that way. And it's not to be a dooms person. And sometimes when we get complacent, the universe likes to remind us that we need to keep evolving, and will throw a spanner into things, right?
Yes.
So for whether it's you need support in your business, whether it's you need support in your mental health, whether you need support just for someone to believe in you, or even with your health or your family, go find the right support. And don't be afraid to ask questions and look outside yourself, because we're humans, we're meant to be connected, and we're meant to be supporting each other to grow and evolve into these beautiful beings that we all can be.
Yes, indeed. A beautiful, beautiful human being. And Miss Catherine, before we wrap up our discussion for Today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast. Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in each fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in each first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Catherine, if every listener could do one concrete thing tomorrow to advance genuine mental health awareness in their circle, what would it be?
Go outside. Without your phone,
Mhm.
go outside, go breathe in the fresh air, get some sunlight, hug a tree if you want to. Actually, there's
Yes.
science proving and backing that up. But honestly, it's free. Just go do it. Go find some grass to stand on barefoot and watch how much it regulates your system. It's amazing.
Yes. Totally, totally empowering answer, Miss Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to Mental Health 101. And can you please invite our listeners to support your new book, Pillars for Life?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. So, if you want to get my new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, it's available on Amazon around the world. It's also on Kindle, so you can read it as an ebook. And if you want a signed copy, you can jump over to my website, which is willowhealing.org, and you can fill in a form and I will get you a signed copy. So, if you would like to do that instead, by all means, I would love to write a beautiful message to whoever wants a signed copy.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Catherine Castani because if you support her, more and more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, and of course, more empowering advocacy to come. So, Miss Catherine, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me as always.
More to come, people. See you soon.